do. Ooh. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Ruth Gotian, and welcome to the Mentor Project's Optimizing Your Success. We have great high achievers here and a fantastic guest, and I am so excited for you to hear her story, because her story is unique, but you'll also hear how small the world is and how I met our special guest, because this is a story of how people really share, and this is the importance of the network, the importance of your friendships, the importance of your community of practice, all of these things that we've been talking about for weeks and weeks. All of these people can really help you. So I want to start off first with everyone introducing themselves so that you can really get to know who our high achievers are, starting with Dr. Susan Bernstone.
Hi, and thank you so much, Ruth, for doing these. And I'm just so happy to be here tonight. I'm Dr. Susan Bernstone. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm also a producer and host of television talk shows. And I am a professor, and I run groups, and I just help, and I'm on these. And I just love when I am able to join. So thank you. And I can't wait to hear Maxine's story and to share my experiences of being a client in the store, definitely in the store. So this is the first time I'm meeting Maxine, so it's welcome.
Thank you.
Susie Katz.
Hi, I'm Susie. I'm a photographer, and I have an educational nonprofit called Photo Wings. And sneak preview, I know Maxine, and she'll tell you how.
That's a great one. Janice Lentz.
Hi, Ruth. It's nice to be here again. I'm Janice Lentz. I'm CEO of Hearing Access and Innovations, and I am working to change the world for people with hearing loss. I'm also traveling to every country in the world pre-pandemic, and have traveled to 194 countries, territories, and unrecognized nations.
Thank you. Dr. Bruce Wiley.
Hi, I'm Bruce Lee. I'm a writer, journalist. I cover health and healthcare for Forbes. I'm also a professor and do computer modeling.
Thank you. Devin Harris.
Always so wonderful to be able to spend time with you guys. I am Devon Harris, three-time Olympian, founding member of the original Jamaican bobsled team, author, motivational speaker, philanthropist, who gets to hang out with Maxine Clark this evening. Hey, life is awesome, man, I'm telling you.
Life is so good. And the wonderful Maxine Clark.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad to be here and be amongst friends. At least Janice and Susie I've known for a while, but I didn't know the others, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you all too.
So Maxine Clark, who you will all get to hear her story in a moment, is the founder, the CEO, and the original CEO and the founder of BuildABear Workshop, and the author of the book, The Bare Necessities of Business. So if any of you have ever been to a BuildABear workshop, you have Maxine Clark to thank. The idea, you will hear how she came up with the idea for this wonderful BuildABear workshop and really how it all came to be. Now, the reason and the way I met Maxine, everyone knows I study extreme high achievers, and I'm writing a book about it. And one day I was talking to Janice, and I knew the whole story of how she met Maxine, which she will tell you about in a few minutes. But she is the one who actually introduced me to Maxine. So I want you to recognize that all of these people in your network can help introduce you to other people. So I want to publicly thank Janice for that great introduction. Now, Maxine, we are dying to hear the story of how you came to be the founder of BuildABear Workshop. I've heard this story. It is so worth hearing. So guys, think of questions that you have for Maxine, type it into the chat, and we'll see if Maxine and the others can answer it. Go ahead, Maxine, tell us the story. Tell us your story of how you came to just create the idea of BuildABear Workshop.
Well, I've always been a creative person. I think I have extreme curiosity. That's my superpower. And I've always been curious about how things are made and how things work. And my father was an electrician, and he used to always, mess around with things and hook things up. And I always wondered, like, how do you do that, Daddy? And So I don't think building something was that unusual to me. It's just that it's not necessarily something that they encourage girls to do when I was growing up. But I had a great education, grew up in the public school system in Miami, Florida, where I met Susie Katz. And I feel like I was very fortunate to grow up in the times that we did, because lots of change was going on, very similar to now, although I thought by now we'd be changing to something different than still the same old issues that we've been dealing with for hundreds of years. But I had the good fortune to go to college, and I wanted to be a lawyer. And I went to go to law school in Washington, D.C. And in order to pay for law school, I had to go to work. So I went to work in the Heck Company in Washington, D.C. in their executive training program, which was, just sort of a part-time job, so that it was a full-time job, but I was doing it so I could go on to another life. I wanted to be a civil rights attorney, and that was what I thought was my passion. And very soon into that project, my boss got sick. And in those days, when you had a heart attack, you were out for many, many months. And so they asked me to fill in for him. I didn't know anything. I mean, literally zero about retailing. I was going to law school. So I took a leave of absence from law school, and I would just add that I'm still on that leave of absence today, because that career, that journey, and I always say the journey is far better than the destination. That journey to where I am today began that day that I had to take over the department and didn't know one single thing, and I had to ask for a lot of advice. And the good news was that the vendors and supporters of that department, the suppliers, really wanted me to be successful, because they wanted Harry to come back and have his business be intact, and also to get his bonus. And so they taught me everything. They were so willing to share with me. Instead of thinking me as a competitor of his, they thought of me as their daughter almost. And you could say that might have been even almost a discriminatory way to approach it, but they were really wonderful to me. And they took me to their factories. They taught me the ins and outs of the business. And when Harry came back, it was more than successful. He'd had a phenomenal year, and he was able to make his bonus, and I was successful. They promoted me. Now, one of the reasons I was successful was because I was the customer. It was just 1971, women were going to work in droves, and there wasn't really a lot of things for us to buy that we needed. And so I was a sportswear buyer, and I was buying those things and putting in the department things that I thought I needed that other women needed as well. And then we were doing that throughout the company in other departments. And so I was sort of leading that charge. And when he was promoted, when he came back and I was promoted, the boss called me from St. Louis, the CEO of the company, and asked me some questions. How did you do it? What were your secrets? And I told him, I said, I didn't know what I was doing. I had to ask a lot of questions, and I listened to what they told me and moved on. And he came very shortly thereafter to meet me in person, because he wanted to see who had done this just fresh out of college. And we had a great conversation. He talked to me for hours in my department. I wanted to know the ins and outs of everything. And about 3 months later than that, he invited me to move to St. Louis. I say invited me. I kind of had a choice, but I didn't really have a choice. They were promoting me to move to the corporate headquarters in St. Louis and to work on projects that required a lot of curiosity for my boss. And so I was really glad to do that. And I was really glad to be able to learn so much. And that took me all along my career. So from that job, I was promoted to executive vice president for merchandising at Famous Bar, and then our discount division, venture stores. And ultimately, I was promoted to the president of Payless Shoe Source. Now, I'm a small person, 4'10". Shoes are my everything, because that's the one thing I can buy and I don't have to alter it. I can just, put them on and feel terrific. So I was very excited to be the president of Payless Shoe Source. The only negative was that it was in Topeka, Kansas. And with the Make Company, about 4 years into that job, decided they wanted to spin the company off as a separate company. And I had the opportunity to sort of take my money and run. And I decided to take my money and run back home to St. Louis and start my own business, although I did not know what it would be. And came back home, and I immersed myself with my friends' kids. I really we went shopping for Beanie Babies, if you remember when those were popular. And they were my next door neighbor, Katie, who was 10 years old at the time. We went into a store that we thought would have Beanie Babies, but they didn't. And we, when she didn't see the one she wanted, she said, these are so easy, we could make these. Well, she meant go home and do a craft project. But I heard something much bigger. And that day, the idea for BuildABear Workshop was born. And 9 months later, we opened our first store in the St. Louis Galleria, which was our local mall. And I wrote a business plan. I had a strategy. I had a 10-year plan. I knew this would be successful because kids were telling me it would be successful, not adults. And that's really how the idea came to be. But it was a long path. You don't just go from being an executive trainee to opening your own company, although that happens pretty commonly today. I had over 20 years of experience learning the business, knowing the real estate, understanding the finances, understanding a lot of things about the business. So that's how it came to be.
I love it. And I heard a few things. So I heard, first of all, that one of our regulars, Susie Katz, who's on the show, you have known since grade school, since the awkward ages. The two of you know each other. So, it's the world coming together where someone who's on the show all the time and our special guest actually grew up together. And Susie actually told me something interesting. Susie, do you want to tell me or ask the question that you were talking about earlier?
I saw it in the chat.
Yeah, you might still be muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah, we both went to a public high school, and I really miss those days when public high schools were fabulous. And out of our school came George Winston, the piano player, Jeff Apple, a movie producer, you. And I was wondering if there was something that happened when we were in school that might have helped you develop skills that still serve you today. For example, as I recall, we were both in the band. And I believe that as a photographer, music helped me with timing and collaboration. And I was wondering if there was anything that influenced you.
Well, one thing that you're absolutely right. We were very fortunate to go to a high quality public education all the way through high school. I would say that, yes, that did influence me. One of the things that you were much more focused than I was, but I actually tried a lot of different things because I was always curious about playing the flute or doing the yearbook or being the editor of the school newspaper. I was constantly moving around, and some people would call that a lack of focus. I called it a curiosity, and it allowed me to try many things and find out what I think I was good at. And I love the flute. I can still play the flute. I can pick it up, Susie, and play a few notes from the songs we used to play. But Susie and I also, my last name, my maiden name was Castleman, and hers was Katz. So when we were forced into alphabetical order, we were also very near each other all the time. So that was a good thing. That was a very good thing. But I would just say that going to that school, being exposed to, we also grew up in a time when there was a lot of change in America going on. Also, the immigration of the Cubans from Cuba to Miami. Tons of young people moved, families, and that was changing our school pretty dramatically. Also, integration, which was also making our school better. And one person that was in the band with us was Winston Scott. Winston Scott, a young African-American man. He used to ride his bike to school, and I would sort of enter school at the same time. We got to be friendly. He was 1 year below us. I don't know if you remember him, Susie, but he went on to Florida State University on a band scholarship, and he became an astronaut. And he was an astronaut in the Endeavor because musicians are also usually really good at math. And he went to be a musician, and he came out an aeronautical engineer. That's the opportunities that existed, and what young people from our high school got to be, no matter what your background was when you started. You got a pretty good education and maybe a little bit of that curiosity to go forward and try some new things.
And I think that's what really makes the high achiever stand out is that constant curiosity. It's never about hitting your peak. I'm done learning. There's always something new to learn. Now, I've also heard a few other things. One, your love of shoes. I totally get that, by the way. And the second is how you moved up the ranks, but then some kid said, oh, we can do that ourselves. And you made the leap from we can do it ourselves to BuildABear workshop. Could you fill in some of those blanks? Because I feel like it was more than just cutting some.
I think it's all of your life. All of your life experiences come into, to being who you are at any point in time. And when, the good old days of growing up and going on school field trips, I was always intrigued by a field trip. I always understood that, we went to the bakery or to the dairy or to the sea aquarium or any place. I was always fascinated by that. I think all children are, even today. And what I saw in my head when Katie said that, it was a kind of a Willy Wonka explosion in my head that really told me what a factory should look like if it was for kids and it was hands-on kind of activity. And in fact, our first store was a bigger than life kind of Willy Wonka story. We built it out really big with lots of big, gigantic features that we put in the first few stores, but then we needed the room for the customers because good news was we had a lot of customers. So we took some of those features out, but still the kids' imagination was allowed to flow there. And I also was, the field trips was one thing. I always had been in factories, as a retailer, as a buyer, as a merchandise manager, as the CEO of a company. I was in factories that made things, including stuffed animals and stuffed slippers. And so I knew that it could be done. I knew exactly the fixture, the machine that I needed. It was an upholstery stuffing machine. And what we did was we put a border, wall around it that made it look like a Willy Wonka kind of stuffing machine. But again, I've always been a student of all of those fantasy movies and things that just are bigger than life and allow you as a child to imagine a world that's bigger and more fun than the one you might live in. And that has always stayed in my head. So I always encourage children, all the children that I teach, whatever grade they're in or wherever they are, to not lose their kid think, to not to give up on their imagination. Don't let an adult beat it out of you. Keep dreaming, keep seeing, looking through the eyes of a camera or the eyes of an artist or the eyes of an architect or an engineer. All those things are possible. Actually, I think if I had known that girls could be engineers, I would have been an engineer because I'm a problem solver. And I really wanted to do that. And I think that what I did here was I didn't invent teddy bears. Ray Kroc didn't invent hamburgers. Howard Schultz didn't invent coffee. We just invented how to do it better. And we put our own perspective, our own, what we loved of that product, whether it was hamburgers or coffee or teddy bears, into making it special for others as well.
Maxine, you're being featured in my book, and one of the other people being featured in the book is James Hondo Geertz, who's the current Undersecretary of the Navy. And he said to me, he's not an innovator, he's a poacher. He sees different ideas and he's able to make connections that other people don't see. And it sounds to me that's exactly what you did. You took all of your experience. You knew what a factory looked like. Obviously, you're not going to put a child in a factory like that, but you knew how to take that and take a child's curiosity and the safety features and the colors and everything else, and you put those together in a new way. And that's innovation. That really is innovation based on your curiosity that you were talking about earlier.
I like that statement. I'm going to borrow that statement from him. I think that all good ideas are already invented. The issue is how do you make it better? And I tell this to young people, everybody's looking for the big unicorn idea, but actually that whatever it is, it's everyday life staring you in the face, and you can make it better and make it more 21st century and more fun, absolutely more fun. You just have to put your mind to it.
Absolutely. Now, Maxine, you said you guys were having a lot of customers. And one of those customers is the woman who introduced us, Janice Lentz. Now, Janice, are you able to tell us why you went from shopping in the store to being on a first name basis with the CEO? Can you tell us what happened?
Well, Maxine was opening up a store. And so my son, who was about 2.5 at the time, loved playing with Build-A-Bear. I mean, he adored Build-A-Bear. And he wanted his sister to play with Build-A-Bear, but she was obsessed with something else. And he thought he could convince her to play Build-A-Bear if he made it personal. And he wanted Build-A-Bear to have hearing aids. And randomly, we happened to be when in the...
Well, you have to mention that your daughter had a hearing aid.
Sorry, my daughter has a hearing loss and wears a hearing aid. So we happened to randomly be when Build-A-Bear was unveiling their new Fifth Avenue store. And one of the salespeople mentioned that Maxine was coming. She said, oh, if you wait a little bit, you'll be able to meet Maxine. And she didn't know about our whole hearing aid idea. So I thought, okay, so I asked my son, can we just wait? And he was very happy. And the staff was amazing. And Maxine doesn't know this, but one of the staff told me when she was, because I didn't know what Maxine looked like. And so one of the staff tipped me off and watched my son while I approached her. I literally abandoned my 2.5-year-old in the store and went up to Maxine. Now, you have to imagine, Maxine's unveiling this major store. Like, it was huge. And I'm sitting there and asking her about hearing aids. She really is a little busy. But I didn't really care. I had my hearing aid idea. And what was really unbelievable is even during, Maxine is about to unveil this store to the public with the press outside. She was willing to listen, which to me was unbelievable. And I remember she said, if you can walk and talk, just walk and talk. And I was like, great. And I could walk and talk, and she's a fast walker. She is really fast. And so I told her my idea, and I remember she was walking into the back part, where the employees walk, and she said, okay, we'll send it to you. We'll send you some ideas. So I'm so accustomed to people just blowing me off, just say what I want to hear to silence me, because they're really not interested in disabilities. But that wasn't Maxine, because shortly thereafter, she sent me a prototype photo. And not only was the prototype was perfect, there was nothing to change. And then just a few weeks later, it was produced. And I remember her asking her saying something, and it was really an inexpensive price. I remember at the time it was about $2. And I couldn't understand how they'd make money. And she was very clear this was the right thing to do. And what is really unbelievable is BuildABear was the first mainstream toy company to develop a hearing aid for toys. No other company did that. Mattel followed suit, but for years, Mattel would not do it. Different CEO. The CEO is very different now, but the previous CEO would not, nor would his staff. And Maxine just said, yes, we're doing it. It doesn't matter if we make money. This is what we're going to do. And so now this is the BuildABear produced this for me when I was the interim executive director for the Deafness Research Foundation. We were giving these away, and I bid on one of these to get this. But this was because I had to have one of these bears as a memory for producing it. So this is the bears, and then this is the hearing aid that she produced for the bears. How amazing is this? So a child with a hearing loss, or who has a grandparent with a hearing loss, or a sibling or a friend, can have a toy that looks like this, and it's normal. And if you see how it works, just a simple little thing. No reason why any other company couldn't do this, but Maxine did it. And that's what
she did it while walking. I mean, it was not a meeting in a boardroom. It was walk and talk.
It was in 2 minutes. She made a decision, literally in 2 minutes. I've said this before. I can count on one hand, literally one hand, the number of people who have said yes in 2 minutes. And Maxine was one of them. And so I have always been just amazed. And we honored BuildABear when I was the interim director at the Deafness Research Foundation, because to me, I wanted to honor people who actually deserved it versus just for big fundraisers. But this is amazing, right? So thank you, Maxine.
You're welcome.
This is fantastic.
Thank you for the idea. But, honestly, that's another part of a story that, how do we get to where we are today? My mother ran a school for children with Down syndrome. So I was always sensitive to children with differently abled children. That's what my mother called them. And so for me, that was just my mother was calling me. It wasn't, you were certainly way too young to be my mother, but, she was speaking in my ear. So I didn't really have to even think about it. She was saying, that's a great idea. Go for it. And, that is the kind of way that I was raised, and the way that I think that the world should be. And that there's so many differently abled children and adults that we can give them more access to everything that's good in the world. So that was, you put the idea in my head, but my mom, was actually nudging me along in there.
I love that. And I love that a mother, it was like mothers and mothers together. I love that.
And you just made it so accessible to everyone. But, to me, I hear people saying yes all the time, but saying yes to actually getting a prototype and getting it produced and then sending it back to the original person, there's about 100 steps in the interim, but yet it still happened.
Yeah,
right?
Janice tells it a little differently than I would. She stayed in touch. She was.
I'm shocked to hear that.
She was not going to let up on we were birds of a feather, and it was a perfect person to be, because she was responsive to the idea. She was responsive to the design. And so we could move quickly, but also because I was the CEO. I could make that decision. And I think more CEOs can do that. They just keep delegating. And sometimes they never even hear all the good ideas because they're not in touch with the customer. But for me, starting my own business was also about staying in touch with the customer, especially children who keep you on your toes and keep you learning all the time. And for me, that was part of the joy of the job, was meeting the parents and the children in the store. I have hundreds, maybe 1,000 pictures of myself with children and their parents in our stores. Not that I know all their names. I promise you I don't, but I know their smiles. And many of them, we have kids that go to Wash U that met me in a store, and they call me up or they find out my email and they write to me. I said, I'm in St. Louis. I go to Wash U now. And I remember I met you at the store opening at Woodfield, or the store opening in so-and-so.
Wow.
Thinking like, that's better than being Santa Claus. You know, it's really a wonderful honor. And I really feel that that was what I was supposed to do. You know, and when you think about going to law school and all the things you think you're supposed to do that get you on the road to what you're really supposed to be when you grow up. And my mother was a tremendous influence on me. Unfortunately, she died when I was just 21 years old. But I think she would be very proud to know that even though I was a capitalist and I was a business person, that I actually did good things with that business acumen.
Now, I'd like to add one other thing to that Maxine may be a little shy to say. In our school, there was a lot of cliques, and she was always one of the people that was approachable and friendly and open. And I see that's carried her throughout her life. And also the idea of being a creative thinker and being curious helped her be smart enough to get out of that silo that so many people are in.
Yes, that's true. I love people, and I love, I'm curious, I'm nosy, and I'm proud of it. You know, I want to know what's going on. I want to meet people in the airport. I want to talk to people. I miss that. That's probably the part I missed the most during this last year, the ability to meet new people. But I've actually found that doing events like this and others, I've met so many new people. It's been really, really, in many ways, the perfect way to do it, because I could never have gone to all those meetings in an airplane. I could never have been everywhere that I've been. So I've made a lot of new friends, and I've been able to mentor a lot more people, young entrepreneurs that I would have been able to do in person for sure. So it's been a mixed bag, but it tilts over to the good for me.
Now, Maxine, let's talk about some of the mentoring that you're doing now, because you stepped down as CEO of BuildABear about 8 years ago, and you went on a different path, but no less of a giving path. Can you tell us what you're doing now, what you're up to?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for asking. Yeah, I wanted to, I started BuildABear, I was 48 years old. So I knew I only had a limited time to be there in order to get the company up and running.
Hold up. Repeat that again. When did you start BuildABear?
I started BuildABear when I was 48 years old.
So there you go.
My second, or maybe my third career, technically. And I knew that I was going to do it maybe till I was 60. That's kind of what I was thinking about, because I had other things I wanted to do. And I knew that in order for the company to be last a lifetime, like Disney, I wanted it to be something that I could build and make strong, and then hire my replacement or promote my replacement. And I always say that the best thing that a founder can do for their company, besides starting it, is turn it over to the right person when they're ready to leave. And we hit the recession, so I had to stretch it out a little bit. But I did find a great person to run the company. I knew that nobody else could start BuildABear and do what I had done, but somebody else could take it to a new future. And so in finding that, helping the board find that person, we're a public company, and in helping that person find helping the board find that person, I could go on and rest easy in the next things that I wanted to do. I'm still on the board of BuildABear. I'm still involved with the BuildABear Foundation. I'm still, involved as much as I want to be, but I don't really want to be too much because I have so many other things to do. But I really was, as Susie said to you before, we had a great education. And when I came to St. Louis, I saw that great education was not as accessible as what I had. And I couldn't really understand it. I didn't really know why it was so unusual in St. Louis. And I really wanted to get involved and try to help teachers who are my heroes. I'm still in touch with many of our high school teachers, believe it or not. I just recently, Susie, talked to our Spanish teacher. I don't know if you had her or not, the one that was the captain of the cheerleaders, and Jeff Rosnick, who was our government teacher. And my favorite teacher was Mrs. Adams, who was our journalism teacher. She unfortunately did pass away, but we all thought our teachers were so old, so much older than us, but actually they were only like 5 or 6 years older. So they're still walking around. on this earth with us. And so I still have in touch with them, and I really appreciated them. So I got involved in public education here in St. Louis, and we were working in starting a charter school here, a high-performing charter school. And I was in a neighborhood that was not very far from my home, maybe like 3 miles from my home, actually, but on the other side of Delmar. Delmar is the dividing line in St. Louis between rich and poor and black and white. And Delmar is a long street. This neighborhood used to be actually at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, it was an immigrant Jewish neighborhood. But over time, it had become a middle-class black and white neighborhood and had grown to being a pretty successful neighborhood. And then the 50s and 60s came along, and the 70s, and the unrest of change. And most of the white people moved out, and the black people stayed. But many of the houses were left, to not necessarily fall into the best hands, or people bought them up thinking that they would be able to turn them into something else, a boarding house or something. And so they left this area pretty unstable. And I was literally one day I was leaving the school, and I turned right instead of left. I said, I'm going to go a different way. And I go by this building they were just putting the sign in that said it's for sale. And I looked at the building and I said, oh my gosh, what is this going to be? We're building this school here, and the neighborhood, they can't have this building fall apart or fall to ruin. And so I actually called a friend who was working on a similar project, but for-profit businesses. And I said, Dennis, why don't you buy this building and turn it into Cortex West? And instead of making it for-profit businesses, let's invest in nonprofit businesses and use some of it for apartments. And he said, I'm so busy, Maxine, why don't you do it? It's similar to what Katie said when she said we could do this. He said, why don't we do it? And I said, why don't we do it? And I went and looked in the building, what I could do to buy it, how much it would cost. It was an old hospital first built in 1904. And the original building is still there. And then they built around it. And, growing up in Miami, we had great hospitals, Jackson Memorial Hospital. We had Mount Sinai Hospital in Miami Beach. We had a lot of good hospitals. And I don't know whether they're still standing or anybody's made much out of them. I haven't been there in a while. But I will say this hospital when it was built in 1904 for the World's Fair, to house people that came in for the World's Fair and then become a community hospital, lasted a long time. And it was a very state-of-the-art hospital. So we bought the building. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it, but I knew that I wanted to turn it into a place that nonprofits in St. Louis that worked on education, healthcare, and community development could work together, as well as creating affordable apartments for teachers, nurses, social workers, public health, public safety workers, those young people, diverse professionals that make that 35 to 55 and can't even find a place to live in St. Louis. And this isn't San Francisco. I can promise you it's not the prices of San Francisco or New York, but we still have a shortage of affordable housing. And so I started on this journey in 2014, and it's 2021, and it'll open this fall, but it's been a long journey. And actually the wherewithal for the project, what I put into the project, significant amount of money, came from BuildABear, from being able to take BuildABear public, being able to put our money to good use and to reinvest it in the children of our community and the people that live in this neighborhood. It will be thriving in the not too distant future, and not because it's gentrified, but because other people, once I bought the property and started to invest, other people bought property and are investing. And so they're changing our metro stop, redoing the metro stop, putting 2 new apartment buildings there as well. Also, this is very close to Forest Park, which is our version of Central Park, which has the Missouri History Museum. It's an absolutely incredible place, right between WashU and the WashU School of Medicine, right between the Central West End and the Delmar Loop, which is the entertainment area around Washington University. So it's really in Hollywood and Vine for St. Louis. Why it didn't get developed is a story for another day, about segregation and redlining and Jim Crow and many, many other bad things that I just never quite understood. But I do know that it's been a hard-fought battle. This is a $100 million project. It's not a small project. And I didn't know anything. Again, it's like back to my early days. I didn't know. If I knew then what I know now, I might not have done it because it's so complex. But we're almost there. The apartments will open in spring of 22. And then we have another part of the building that was the nursing school that actually is in pretty good shape, that we hope will be turned into an early childhood center that somebody else will operate, a really good Montessori or some other really interesting way of teaching young children art, music, science, all the fun things that they should be, pushing their hands into before they can read and write, just to find out what they're really good at, what their gift is, and then helping them develop their gift as they move through the school system, but getting off to a really good start. with a really big hug, but the hug is for education, not necessarily just a teddy bear.
I love that. I love that. That, every so often we get guests that really stun me to silence. Even if I've heard the stories before, they're just, every time there's another detail there, you just completely changed an entire area of St. Louis. Wow. I mean, they're changing metro stops. That doesn't just happen. And you didn't know how to do this. And talk about on-the-job training, right? Yeah, it's that, really that thing that the high achievers have where not trying is simply not an option.
I sit on the board of Washington University, and I am on the Building and Grounds Committee, and have been on that committee for the last 10 years. I have learned a lot sitting there, watching how they've transformed that university and those buildings as well, and the medical school. So I did, osmosis is a good way to learn as well. And I took copious notes all the time, not necessarily knowing what I was going to do with it, but it fascinated me how they could build so much into such a small space. This is actually 8 acres. And it's about 500,000 square feet, about the half of a mall. I always tell people it's about half of a mall. So it was a big undertaking, but it will be really worth it. And then other people will say, I can do that. I can do that. And that's really why I do the things I do, so that other people can see they can do it also. Not so I can do it all. I don't intend to do this again, not this kind of project. But I am interested in one of the things I've discovered on my way to this project was all the beautiful churches and synagogues that were built in cities, in urban areas, and that are now basically empty because people have left the city. And that, I'm worried about that. I'm trying to think about how we could repurpose those buildings. So I've been thinking about that for the last couple of years as I pass by them and see them become emptier and emptier, especially during COVID. But what could we do with them? How could we rethink how we use a church or a synagogue for, large, some can be houses, some can apartments, some can be venue providers, wedding venues, things like that. But they're just so beautiful, with the most beautiful, they're historic buildings. I mean, St. Louis was one of the largest cities at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. And that's when a lot of these buildings were built. They're absolutely magnificent. Meet Me in St. Louis type from that movie, if you remember it. That house was in our neighborhood where we're building this hospital.
Wow. Hey, Susie, was she always like this?
Yeah, she always had a lot of energy and curiosity. Yeah, and we got together again about a decade ago, and it was like we picked up like it was yesterday.
Yeah, it is funny. I was not nearly. Susie was the quiet creative. We both were music. We both played the flute, but you don't really know all the people that you grow up with. And I think that you find out as adults that you turned into people that you never even knew that side of the person, and that's also fascinating. Because there's some people that don't really like high school or don't want to even talk about where they grew up. But I don't feel that way. I had so many interesting friends and acquaintances. I mean, we had a big school. Our senior class was about 1,000 people. Our senior class. So we knew a lot of each other from elementary school. Some of us went all the way up through elementary school together. But we've become interesting people. It's interesting to see people's politics. It's interesting to see many people are still working, even though we're of a certain age, that we don't have to work. I think this is the first year I've ever been happy that I was my age, because I could get that vaccine pretty easily. But, it's just it's been a wonderful journey. It started my father bought a house in a neighborhood for us. He was in the military, so he got a house on the GI Bill, and that house is no longer standing, but the house that's on that yard is now selling for millions of dollars. So the neighborhood was a good neighborhood, even though the lots were small and the house was it's the way it was, the American dream. My father and mother got to live the American dream. They just didn't live long enough to see their children enjoy what we've enjoyed of it. But they paved a good path for us, that's for sure.
Maxine, Bruce, who's here, he's a physician. He has an MBA. He writes for Forbes. He does computer modeling, and he's been told, Bruce, I don't want to put the words in your mouth, so tell me if I'm not saying this correctly. You're different, Bruce. You were told that you're different. And what was the response? What was the second half of that sentence?
Yeah, it was, you're different. People don't like different.
People don't like different.
Yeah.
And Maxine, you're different. You're different because I'm exhausted just hearing the what it takes to pull off what it is that you pulled off. So have people told you you're different? And then, and if so, what was your response? Yeah. Bruce, brushed it off.
Yeah, people, yeah, I know that people responded to me differently because I was a woman, especially in the business world. But at first they treated me like I was their daughter. And I didn't think that was necessarily a bad thing, especially as they were nurturing me along. I don't think they ever saw me as a threat. But as I got more successful, because my numbers were better, I always tell young women, get into a business where you can be measured by the results every single day, that they started to treat me differently, as if I did have a brain, that I wasn't just this little girl, playing at business until I got married and had children and all that kind of stuff. And then I got pretty vocal about things that I cared about and things that I stood up for, standing up for hiring more women, hiring more minorities. And, people would say to me, we don't do it that way here. Or, that she's going to make more money than her husband if we give her another raise, or, stuff like that, that I just was appalled at. But I was successful enough that I wasn't worried they were going to fire me because of what I was saying, because my business value was too important. So I knew that. And I just had a sense about it. But maybe I did sometimes step over the line. I'm sure that not everybody really liked me. Some people were probably jealous of my guts that I had to say what I said. But I know that they thought it. And there were times that I thought I was right and my boss was wrong. And I didn't get the promotion that I thought I deserved when I thought I deserved it. But I got it later. And actually, I had to admit to him, because it was always a him. I never had a female boss, that he was right, that I was more ready by the time I got the job than I would have been if I had gotten it when I thought I was ready. And so sometimes people know you better than you know yourself. And I always took those criticisms as not criticisms, as improvements, suggestions for improvement. I'll show them. I don't know the word no. If somebody tells me no, like I'm on it, like I'm on yes, I'm going to prove you wrong. And that's actually also served me well. So if somebody said it to me or acted funny to me or walked away when I walked up, I didn't let it get to me, just for a second maybe, but not for very long. Like Bruce, I just kind of, okay, that's your problem, not mine.
As my kids say, that's a you problem.
I like that.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Susie.
No, I was just going to say, in terms of Bruce being different, it's because he's covered so many different areas in a time when people didn't respect that. Maybe Bruce could flesh that out just a little bit more.
Yeah, I guess, well, certainly like in many fields like medicine, you're pushed to do one thing or specialize in an area. Like the mantra was pick a body part or pick a disease and stick with it. And when they told me, oh, you should pick a body part and stay with it, I said, well, I don't have a favorite body part. I like all the body parts, because without all of them, you sort of fall apart. And then I also was interested in other areas like writing and business and et cetera. And that wasn't really typical. So a lot of the focus was, put your head down and focus in an area. But I don't think everyone, that's great for some people, but not great for everyone.
We have two neurosurgeons here at Washington University that are playwrights. And they produced this play called Brainworks that we ended up putting on public television as well. And they did 4 short stories of how the brain works. And so amazing. And I really thought that that's what we should use to teach adults. Like if we were using that strategy to teach people about vaccines, we might not have the issue that we're facing right now. So amazing. It was a sellout crowd the 2 nights that we put it on, and then they taped it for television. But doctors have an amazing talent, and we should just let it loose, because they're number one, they're so smart, but they're also quite creative, especially when they're research physicians, and they see patients. And they look at it each, if they're a good doctor, they're looking at patients as individuals, not as a body part, but as a whole person. I'm really interested in medicine. I'm interested in this integrated medicine and how all those things, if I knew then what I know now, I'd probably be tall and thin. I think that there's lots of things out there in medicine that if they taught it to us, we would be able to be much healthier people, but they didn't. They kept it a secret. They didn't think people were smart enough to understand. They didn't put it in a format of which we could understand. So that's really why I think that you're looking at the world like that is what we all need. We need more doctors like you. Do you teach doctors also?
I'm sorry?
Do you teach doctors also?
I have. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think the language is so important, because I think a lot of these field siloed languages where only like a certain number of people understand. It's almost like, hey, you're of this certain type because you can understand what I'm actually saying, but where it's really important to help everyone understand all these concepts. And I think that's where, I mean, you're a perfect example how crossing different areas have really generated or germinated some great ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, something you said about, and I think this is probably from your working in retail, is that you're constantly being measured, right? How are you compared to yesterday? How are you compared to a year ago today? And that's how you can prove that you're actually successful. And one of the greatest management thinkers, Peter Drucker, actually said, what gets measured gets managed.
Mm-hmm.
And, and that's interesting because at the end of the day, if you have the numbers, you're in, you did it. Now, Devin, I mean, you're a perfect story, right? Who's better?
Indeed.
How do you get from the tropics of Jamaica to the Winter Olympics? Right? It was about the numbers.
It is, yeah, right. Break it down by the numbers. As they say, inch by inch is a cinch, right? But Maxine, I have a question for you, and Dr. Susan, I'm hoping I can get your perspective on it as well from the psychologist point of view. So Maxine, in the beginning, fresh out of college, to use your word, let's go back to the beginning. I like to start there. So your boss had to go out and you were taking over. You knew you didn't know enough, which I think is a mark of high achievers as well. They know what they don't know, and you weren't shy about asking for help. But how did you know that you wanted to do? I'm trying to understand from your perspective, your mindset. What made you believe you could do this? And Dr. Susan, I'd be curious to hear the professional psychologist's view of this as well.
Because nobody told me I couldn't. I wasn't raised to know that I couldn't do something. Even as a girl, my mother was a very outspoken activist in the community for children that were differently abled, particularly, but also for persons of color. And she was a very active civil rights person. She took me everywhere she went. And so I didn't know that you couldn't do those things. I have so many stories I could tell, but one was my mother went to a beauty salon that was owned by a Black woman. That was where she went every Saturday in Coconut Grove. And I went with her. And I didn't know that white women didn't usually go to a Black beauty salon or vice versa. But in the back room of that beauty salon, it was actually a front for a political action group that was working on civil rights. And I happened to walk into the room by accident. And my mother said, "Oh, no, don't go back there." And then the person, one of the people in the room said, "No, let her come in. She can help us put the signs together." I was like 10. And once he told me I could be part of that at the table with him, I thought I could be at any table. I could be anywhere. And I never even thought about it. Honestly, I think that's my naivety. I just go. And I want to do well. I want to make the world a better place to be. I was going to go to law school. I was going to go back to law school. It was just a temporary job. And I didn't think about it being my full-time forever job. I took a leave of absence. And then I decided that I was really good at this. Other people told me I was good at it also, but I was good. I loved it. It was creative. It was generating business. It was the time when technology was coming into the retail space. It was creative. It was fun. These people were really nice to me that wanted me to learn. I couldn't think of anything better than that. I had no idea. Nobody told me what a buyer did, or my mother. No one showed me that. Even though I love to shop, I didn't know how the products got from one place to another. It was also in the time that we were slowly moving from making things in America to making things in the Far East. And I was visiting a lot of factories in North Carolina and South Carolina that wouldn't even help you make it something in a different color. They did not want your business, really. And so I can speak from authority when I tell you that when I went overseas, they couldn't do enough for you. They wanted to make it in whatever color you wanted. How many sizes do you want? They made it so much easier, especially for a person like me. I didn't think the vendors were telling me no because I was a female. They just didn't want to do it our way, and they didn't really believe there would be any competition. That was a good lesson for me, also, to see that if you wait long enough, and tell people, "Oh no, they'll never change their watches," then a swatch would never be invented, or the iPhone. We used to wear headsets or carry a transistor radio, then we never would have had a Sony Walkman or an iPod. I mean, these are all things that, just evolve if you believe in the possible. And I believe in the possible. And that, again, comes from my mother. My mother worked with children that had Down syndrome. When she started her school, children died at 12, 13 years old. Their life expectancy was short. Now it's long, and they work and they have jobs, and they're mainstreamed into the public, and we all know what kind of contribution that they can make to society. And, that's believing in the possible, and I think that, we all set examples for children in those ways, but I was lucky to be exposed to them in a unique way through my family, my teachers, my friends. Growing up in that time when, in the 50s and 60s, when all kinds of impossible things were happening, heart transplants and new businesses created, and, gasoline mileage, being extended on cars, all kinds of new inventions, rocketing to the moon. That we saw that in our school on a little TV that we had to look at, but we saw that in real life. So why couldn't it be possible for me to be able to do anything I wanted to do?
It's also apparent to me, though, Maxine, that the nexus between law school and the rest of your life, because you wanted to do immigration law, you said, civil rights law,
civil rights,
is this desire to help people, and so I see that connection.
I love it.
Yeah.
Dr. Susan, you're going to weigh in. We need you to weigh in here.
Well, it's so interesting, Devin. First of all, you read my mind, because as Maxine, I am blown away by the story. I'm practically speechless. I just admire everything that you've done. You're an amazing person on so many different levels. But I think that you actually answered Devin's question, and there were so many levels of I was thinking as you're telling the story, what makes you different? What gave you all of the courage and just the perseverance to do it? And there was a couple of things that you gave away that I was thinking about, to just even what you said, what your response to Devin was, and that you did have the family, you had the values of your parents that you alluded to. And when you told the story, which almost brings tears to my eyes, when Janice approached you and you had your mother in your head, that was just very telling on so many levels, because she was guiding you, right? So there was that voice that was in your head, and it was hers, and she was saying, yes, you can do this, you can do this. And my hunch is that whether you knew it or not, those values, those voices from the school that you grew up in, all those schools that you and Susie talked about, the values, the beliefs, you were encouraged. Your school encouraged you to try different things. It wasn't putting you in a box. It wasn't no. That allowed you to do that. And again, you the way you discussed your parents is that they lived the American dream. They probably worked really hard and they stuck to certain values, but you were taught that you could do anything. And one of the other things that was so impressive was that, and Ruth, you talk about this in terms of the need, and we've spoken about it on other shows, is you were not afraid to not know something and to say, I don't know this. Come on, everybody, let's figure this out. Help me. And that really is just one of the characteristics of really true success, and what's so important for people to understand, that you just embraced it and you said, yeah, I don't know this. Okay, I'm going to learn. And that carried you through. And I heard that in every single endeavor, even now, and also I know, Ruth, you reacted to when you heard how old Maxine was when she first started the business. It was like, oh my goodness, like on so many levels. I
was inspiring.
It's so inspiring, and you're just, so impressive, and from my heart, I just feel the story, the chills, that listening to every single piece of, and you followed your values, and you stayed true to yourself in terms of what you believed in, and you didn't allow anybody to say, no, we're not going to do that. The hearing aid thing isn't really on many levels, the good thing. And you were like, no, this is that. And you were able to take everything that you were exposed to, and just apply it to everything you did. I'm just, it's an honor to be in the same Zoom room with you, if you will.
Oh, thank you. There's so many other things that, as we're sitting here listening and you're retelling my story to me, I'm thinking about all the other people that have influenced me that might have had a ding in my head at that time, because in St. Louis, we have the Moog Institute for Hearing, and it's part of the Washington University. It was part of Washington University. And one of our neighbors was the founder of this institute and they were doing the hearing implants, the
Cochlears.
And yes, she was criticized for it. You know, she wasn't really a pretty popular person because it was controversial. But I always thought what was controversial about a child being able to hear. You know, that was not controversial. But I didn't really, I didn't get to, my husband was more involved in that than I was. But when Janice came up to me, I'm sure that knowledge of this came into my thought process, and that kids would feel okay that they can't necessarily hear perfectly, but they can hear something. You don't know. I mean, it's all about life experience and connections. And I think that's the part that's so valuable to me, or the friends that I've met along the way, even if I met them for a day or a week, or that they imparted something to me. Almost everybody. I think everybody did. Even people I didn't like so much taught me something I didn't want to do.
But you're open to that, Maxine, and not everybody's open to that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came through is how, to answer Devin's question, is like how open you were to allowing that in. And you also said it, you didn't take it as criticism. Maybe the nose hurt for a second, but you just went, oh, okay. And what do I need to learn? How can I get it? How can I do this? Okay, that's just a no. All right, how do I turn it into a yes? And not Susan, stopping there.
It's so interesting because when I interviewed Maxine for the book, I asked her about her failures, her challenges, etc. And, she's human like the rest of us, and she has a long list of them, I'm sure. And she had to pause and say, I'm sure there were many. I just can't think of them right now, which is a very, very common answer when I interview extreme high achievers. Of course there were challenges. Of course there were, but it doesn't stop them. It's just part of the journey. And that phrase that you were talking about, Susan, that I always talk about, that high achievers fear not trying more than they fear failing, because failing is part of the journey. You learn your lessons from it. It's an opportunity to learn new things. It's an opportunity for enhancement, but then you continue. And the focus is on how you will overcome the challenges, not if you will overcome the challenges. And from those challenges, new opportunities come, right? Luck is earned. Luck is earned. So it's part of paying those dues along the way and garnering all those things that you're going to learn. Guys, we are at the top of the hour. We need to close down, and we're going to tell everyone where they can hear about you. Thank you very much to Maxine Clark, founder and original CEO of BuildABear Workshop and author of the book, The Bare Necessities of Business. Bright yellow color. Go check it out. Everyone, I know that you know that the audio from this goes onto a podcast which comes out on Sunday. Everyone here volunteers their time. So please, if you could, just subscribe and leave us a review so the Mentor Project can put out more great shows like this and more great podcasts. Guys, this has been fantastic. I want everyone to tell us where people can hear more about you, because we could talk all night, because there's so much to learn. And I think that's part of it, is learning from high achievers. So Devin, how can people hear more about you? And you might need to get off mute. He's still in the bobsled.
I tell you, the only time you can keep me quiet is when you put me on mute. So, devonharris.com is my website. Instagram and Twitter at Keep On Pushing 88. My podcast is youtube.com/Keep On Pushing Always. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm the guy in the Jamaica bobsled uniform.
Thanks, Devin. Susie Katz.
So you can find my work at photowings.org, photowings.org. I made a presentation for the Mentor Project. So if you go to 1 Hour with the Mentor, you can learn about it in a little bit more detail. And some of my own personal photography is at susankatzphotography.com. But I spend most of my time with Photo Wings.
Thank you. And our original connector for tonight, Janice Lintz, and show up the original BuildABear that made all this possible.
Well, it It is actually fascinating to hear the story behind it. You know, when you approach someone, you have no idea what their reaction is going to be. And so to hear the backstory to me is really unbelievable. And it is interesting because it's consistent. I tend to find that the people who say yes have some connection to disability somewhere in their life. And so it is interesting. It's not surprising to me because tends to be the yes people. Over and over, I find that out. It's easy. I don't have to convince them because they're already convinced. But I can be, so thank you, Maxine, for coming, because this was fantastic and so interesting to hear your story. And I never really got to formally say and publicly thank you, but thank you for changing the entire toy industry for children with hearing loss, because other companies followed you and you were truly a force of nature that just disrupted the entire industry. So thank you.
You're welcome.
And so I can be found janicelintz.com for my advocacy work, and my professional consulting work is hearingaccess.com.
Thank you. Janice, you brought tears to my eyes with that one. And
it's
also,
unbelievable. You just have no idea how much of a difference it made. Like for my son, it was a game changer. He was so happy. And Ariel ended up playing, you know, she played with BuildABear because she was also touched by Jared. I mean, it's really interesting. And it's funny because now my son invented a hot sauce company. So when you're talking about the curiosity, yeah, he's the one who came up with the idea. So it's just fascinating to me.
Thank you. Dr. Bruce Wiley.
Well, now I actually have an urge to build a bear. Maybe the bear can keep me company in front of this brick wall.
I have a feeling it's going to come up in the next Forbes article.
Yep.
You know what? That's a challenge, Bruce. That's a challenge. We want
Exactly.
Build-A-Bear in the next Forbes article.
I also would like some hot sauce, but that's another story.
I'm going to have to connect you with Jared.
Absolutely. So I can be found if you Google Bruce Y. Lee. The Y makes a difference because if you just do Bruce Lee, there's rumor has it that there was a martial artist by that name. And also, if you want to read my stuff, it's Bruce Y. Lee Forbes, and my website is bruceYlee.com, and my Twitter handle is at Bruce_Y_Lee.
Thank you. Dr. Susan Bernstone.
Thank you again. This was really amazing. It's just an honor. And thank you also for I have so many great memories of bringing my daughter and my niece to the BuildABear stores. I'm in New York and been to many of stores. And what's so interesting also, Devin, I was thinking about the question that you had raised and Maxine's early life experience. A lot of the work I do with the people that I work with is they didn't have those messages given to them. They weren't told that they could do anything, whether it was by their family members or schools, and working with people to how did they not allow their early experiences to not stop them from becoming successes. And so that's a lot of the work. So if you want to learn more about my work, you can actually contact me directly at drsusanbernstone@gmail.com. You can Google me. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a website that's still under construction, but you can get there. I also, my show is called Your Voice with Dr. Susan. That's on public access. You can Google that. It's also on a Facebook page, as a YouTube page. And also I am working with the Mentor Project. And that's why we're all here tonight. And you can find me on the Mentor Project. And I also produce the shows for them as well. So thank you so much again, Maxine.
You're
was
welcome.
Just really an honor. And thank you, as always, Ruth.
Thank you. Maxine, if people wanted to hear more about you, where should they look?
Well, I think you could go to the clarkfoxstl.com website. That's our family foundation website. And you can see all the work that we do. And maybe there's something we can do for you in terms of thinking about access, and it's something that we care about deeply. And then also the Delmar Divine, Delmar and Divine as in DIVINE.com. It's called the Delmar Divide today, but we're changing it. The one letter N is for investment, innovation, and inclusion. And then those will probably be the place you could find out the most about what's going on. But I'm on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Chief Exec Bear on Twitter, and Maxine CEB on Instagram. I still have some of my bear lingo going along with me, but I'm easy to find. I'm the one that looks like they're a small, short person.
And you're quite active on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Thank you again, Maxine. Behind the scenes, we have the CEO of the Mentor Project, Dr. Debbie Heiser. She makes us all look gorgeous. Thank you so much. I am Dr. Ruth Gotian. I am your host for tonight. And you know, I study high achievers. There will be another Forbes article tomorrow about one of the #1 executive coach in the world. He's giving away all of his intellectual property for free. So there was an article about it last week, the first part. The second part is coming out tomorrow. So you will hear more about that. So I encourage you to go check that out. I can be found on my website, ruthgotian.com, RuthGotian. All the social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, it is just my name, Ruth Gotian. If you want to hear more of Maxine Clark's amazing story, she will be featured in my book, which is coming out next winter. Go check out the Mentor Project. They are hosting us. If you're listening on the podcast, please leave us a rating and review. We will see everybody next week. Thank you guys so much. This has been amazing. Bye, everyone.
It was fun.